Good morning and welcome to episode 3 of the Kim B. Davis Show. We are still practicing remote and social distancing, and in studio at her office, we have Dr. Saudia Twine. Good morning, Dr. Saudia Twine.
Good morning.
How are you this fine Tuesday?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm very relaxed. All I can say is it's another day. I'm glad to be alive and well. So that in and of itself is a blessing. So I'm happy.
Amen. Amen. Especially during this pandemic and all that we have going on.
Right.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on the Kim B. Davis Show this morning. Dr. Saudia Twine is a licensed professional counselor. She is a relationship coach and host of her own podcast, Eros Meets Agape. And so today we're going to be talking about relationships and love during quarantine. And I saw this great report on the news a couple of weeks ago, and it was talking about couples who were struggling during this time. So I thought, you know what better person to turn to than the expert on relationships? Dr. Saudia, is there anything that you're hearing from your clients right now that they're struggling with in terms of couples during this quarantine time, in terms of issues of communication, needing space? Are people climbing the walls? Is that a generational thing, or what can you tell us?
To be completely honest, my couples that I see, as well as the individuals and families that I see, because I'm already seeing them for a pre-existing issue, the confinement of space right now has not necessarily exacerbated the problem per se. However, on another end, so I don't see it with my clients. I do see it. I also teach at a couple of universities. So I see it from my students where we're in a counseling techniques class and they're discussing that a lot in their role play sessions. But I also host a social media group, and in the group, they are discussing how this has been an issue for them. And prior to the second extension of the quarantine, prior to that being announced for the state of Michigan, because I'm sure this is broadcasting outside of the state of Michigan. So
Yes.
Just clarity purposes, for the state of Michigan, we were on a second extension date for the quarantine. And from that extension date, I had let people know during that first phase, these are some things you probably want to become more aware of. And I'm not trying to be morbid, but for those that are dating and is freshly new, you are in a great position because it allows you to really kind of take it back to World War I times, or any time where you're away from your partner by distance, you only have the option of connecting via communication. So for those particular people, it's very healthy because you like this person, you're interested in them. In order to keep that going, the only way you can do that right now is through communicating via phone or FaceTime or something like that. However, for those that are living under the same dwelling place, whether they are cohabitating, engaged, married, whatever that may be, these are individuals who are quickly going to identify with, I'm getting along well with my partner, or I'm not getting along well with my partner. And because of that, I started giving some hints and tips for how to handle those things by first creating insight in regards to who they are as individuals as well as a couple, and then to create some action so that they can do some things in order to correct that.
Excellent. So what if you are a couple who's been married 10, 20 years and you've never really had to go through anything difficult, and now you both were a two-earner couple, you both had jobs outside of the home, there are children, and now you are all stuck in the house together. And although marriage was happy beforehand, it's a little bit stressed now because everybody needs space. There are all these additional responsibilities, especially teaching, which typically falls on the mother. What would you advise a couple to do so that they don't run into problems once this is over?
Okay, so I heard a few things being identified. And if I go back to my researcher roots, we're looking at the variables that are identified. These
Yes.
extraneous variables, or should we just say issues? These
Mm-hmm.
issues that are happening, technically, these are things you have to look at based on per person. So I heard you say if they were a two-income family, if one now is the stay-at-home parent who is now, when I say stay-at-home parent, now meaning stay-at-home teacher in our homeschool teacher. And on addition to, I'm still a spouse, I'm still a parent, I'm still an individual, I'm still an employee in some cases. So it really depends on a number of variables and how those things affect you. So the better way to describe that is when we think of a couple or a family unit, think of like a rubber band. A rubber band will expand when it is being stretched, which means there is something that is causing it to stretch. And then it will contract when that, should I say, tension has been released. A family or a couple is the exact same way. When we are being stretched based off of outside variables, then that means we put tension on our relationship or our family unit. Some couples are not rigid and they're able to be flexible with that tension. So they go with the flow and it doesn't affect their dynamic. Couples, whereas that tension causes them to be negatively affected, well, then it becomes a matter of now looking at specifically what are you having the issue with? And that's what you have to pay more attention to. So if I take a sidebar for a moment, say it's the finances that's an issue. We're accustomed to living a certain lifestyle and some things are being constricted because that income is not the same. Well, then we have to look at what is your meaning of money. And the meaning of money for people is quite different. The meaning can be status, it can be enjoyment, it can be power, control. And I always tell couples that there is a overlying issue that brings the conversation, but then there's an underlying reason for why this is affecting them. So instead of arguing about money per se, instead, what does that mean to you? So in essence, for people who struggle in that category, it's really a matter of saying, okay, somehow right now you may feel a sense of less power or you may feel threatened because it's reminding you of a time period in life where money was not as available. So therefore, certain securities were being threatened. And let's take a look at that because it is those emotions that are being triggered by this present day situation. So let's talk about the emotions and then we can see how we can work together to kind of help present day. So whether it's money, if it is just communication in general, then we have to really look at the relationship. Did the relationship have bad communication beforehand? And maybe we didn't notice it because we were busy with life. We were busy with raising our kids, checking in on parents, juggling careers. And so therefore we didn't put a lot of time and attention to that. Whereas now in this quarantine nature, we have nothing but time to focus on what's working as well as what's not working. So it's a matter of really looking at where did the problem start and what is the underlying emotion. And the best way to handle that really is with a conversation and figuring out when is the right time to have that conversation.
Those are all great points. So I'm going to push a little bit deeper, Dr. Twine.
Go for it.
What if it is communication? What if it was that these were issues that were sort of swept under the rug? Because one of the things when I jump on Facebook for a few minutes each day just to check in and see what's happening, I see a lot of couples that I know who, complain about not having space or complain about what seems to be like minor things like, I shouldn't have to ask my husband to take the trash out. He should know that the trash is full. He should take it out. Or, why didn't somebody feed the kids? They know that the kids are home in the afternoon. We're all here. Why am I the only person that's doing this? Their clothes dirty. Everybody knows how to wash clothes. Things like that. If it's communication, what would you advise a couple to do in terms of that conversation? If it was always maybe that communication was poor and people were just caught up with the busyness of life.
Okay. So I'm a firm believer that communication itself is not the issue. We communicate based off of how we are feeling, and our feelings are driven by our thoughts. So I always talk a lot about attachment theory, and for sake of time, really attachment theory basically guides our thoughts. It's with us from the cradle to the grave. It was a gift given to us by our primary caregiver. That's the person that raised us. And whatever type of relationship we had with that individual, it will be practiced in childhood, lay dormant. Then we get into a romantic relationship with someone, and that attachment style becomes alive. And it drives the way that we think, it drives the way that we interpret information, we filter it in our head, and thus the way that we communicate. So when I communicate with my partner, a lot of times it has nothing to do with them, but it has everything to do with the fact that I'm feeling threatened in some way, shape, or form, that we are no longer being connected. And because I feel threatened because of the disconnection, instead of really saying, babe, I really need some time with you, I miss you, I want to really get a chance to just have some one on one time with you, we generally don't say that because most of us are afraid to be vulnerable, even with the person that we've given our heart to. And when we don't choose or elect to be vulnerable, we don't express our heart core emotions. Instead, we express everything in our society that's okay, which is happy, mad, sad, and glad. And so, because of that, it seems normal for me to fuss with you or fight with you when I'm arguing about something silly. But really, what's happening is that little thing is agitating me because underneath that, I'm really feeling as if I don't come first, or I don't matter, or you brought something to my attention and it makes me feel as if I'm not good enough, or I can never get it right. So I'm really dealing with those, what we call automatic thoughts, these core beliefs that were not given to me by you, they were given to me by my primary caregiver. And this is not to bash parents, because at the end of the day, the way that our brain works and the way that God kind of designs us is to kind of solve something where we're in the moment, and it's never meant to carry with us for forever. But instead, we use it as a crutch. So I, as a child, will have misinterpreted information because guess what? As a child, my parents aren't sharing with me all of the details, right? So I kind of fill in the gaps on my own. And in most cases, when we fill in those gaps, we're wrong as a child. But by this time, I'm developing a belief. So let's just say, for instance, that my automatic belief is that I don't come first. Then, no matter how I view something, if my spouse is now busy trying to relax because they've had a stressful day on Zoom with coworkers and their boss, and I want some quality time, well, guess what? I'm not going to see it as, okay, they're busy juggling a new project that they have to get out by a certain deadline. Instead, I'm going to see it as, he never takes time out for me. He never puts me first. It's always the job coming first. But that's my belief, not necessarily what is true. However, if I never communicate that and I never share, babe, I feel like you don't put me first. When these things happen, it makes me feel, instead, that conversation is, you always work and always put your job first. You never think, and it becomes accusatory. It becomes blaming. So, in order to really kind of help couples with their communication during this time, it's really a matter of figuring out what I would say. One, when is the best time of day to talk? Everybody is different. I am not a morning person, so having your heart spill out to me in the morning is not going to help because my mind is not fully functioning. I'm an afternoon person or a late morning person. So you have to look at what is the best time of day. So if I want to talk with my partner, I wouldn't pick the best time of day that is good for me. I'm going to pick the best time of day in which they function, because guess what? That's when they're most alert. That's when they're attentive. That's when they're engaged. They're full on life in that moment. So therefore, I have their undivided attention if we set time away. It's my issue. So I'm going to want to talk about it regardless of what time of day it is. So it doesn't matter if it was early morning because it's bothering me. I'm going to make certain that I'm available for it because I want to fix it. So you always want to pick the time of day that is best for your partner. And then it's a matter of how you approach that conversation. Research shows that 96% of the time, the way that we start a conversation is always going to indicate the way that it ends. So if I start off being accusatory, blaming, nagging, controlling, demanding, well, that's only going to escalate into an argument. However, if I soften my approach, hey, babe, can I talk to you about blah, 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 blah? Most men hate to hear 4 words. We need to talk. When they hear those words, for most men, in their heads, they're trying to figure out, where did I go wrong? What did I do when I said blah, 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 blah? And they're trying to figure out how to respond because as women, we've been engaged most of our lives to really work through conversation. And when we're working through conversation, we're learning how to communicate and express ourselves. Most men did not grow up in that type of household or lifestyle. We are changing as a society, but for most people that are, I would say, Generation X, Generation Z, and I would say pretty much just those two, they really didn't get that, right? Or any generation before them. They really didn't get that. We're becoming aware of it now to change for millennials and those after millennials. So as a result, men have issues with having conversations because they know they have to really come up with what their answers will be. So say, for instance, most women bring up a conversation, an issue with their spouse, and they're going through points 1 through 7 so quickly. Most men, you're on point 6. He's really just thought of the answer to point 2, not because he's slow, not because he's not intelligent, not because he's not emotionally or mentally capable, but simply because he doesn't have the practice, the muscle memory to communicate and process emotions that fast. So it takes him time to digest that and process that. So when we say, hey, babe, can I talk to you later on about such and such? Then whatever time you all decide to communicate, he's had time to figure out what he can say, how he saw things. So therefore, in the moment, he can respond with you as opposed to trying to catch up later. Because what happens in the moment, she's going through her various points. He doesn't have an answer, no response, really agitates her so very much. And because she's agitated, she feels as if he's not hearing her and her feelings are not being understood. So therefore, she's even further frustrated because of that. And that's not even the case. He's just trying to catch up. So it's looking at the best time of day to talk, and then softening that approach so that you can tell him in advance what it is you want to talk about. And then what it is when you're in the conversation, what it is that you need from him. We have to make it clear. As women, we want them to figure it out. I do this all the time with couples. As a matter of fact, just yesterday, I just told a couple, she was upset with her fiance because he didn't just know what to do. I'm like, no, you have to tell him. He's not a mind reader. And then she says, well, if I tell him to do it, it's not as special. No, it still is just as special because he's calming, he's soothing, he makes you feel secure, he makes you feel safe when you get that. That's not going to diminish you getting that feeling. So don't take that away from him. So we tend to do that, and it's just a matter of letting that go. And eventually he will know. But the process of becoming one is a process in and of itself. And it takes time and communication for it.
Wow, Dr. Saudia Twine, you just gave us a lot to chew on. There are 2 more points that I want to take from that. The first one, you talked about belief systems that you have from when you grew up. What happens when you have, and you talked a little bit about it, but what happens when you do have a toxic mindset and you don't recognize it? And maybe this is the first time that a couple is actually dealing with it. What would you suggest to them first to sort of try to address it or figure out what's going on?
Basically, it's one of those things I like to call our attachment beliefs. It's like a ghost that kind of sits in the back of our head. And when I say ghost, I'm not trying to be spooky or anything, but there was this movie called A Beautiful Mind. And in The Beautiful Mind, the gentleman had some mental health issues where he saw things that were not there. Over time, when he got help with that, they asked him, do you still see the people that used to talk to you? And he said, yes. And then they asked him, well, do they still talk to you? And he said, yes. And they asked, well, what's the difference? And he said, I no longer respond now. It's the same way with our attachment beliefs. When we become aware of them, and just for clarity purposes, we have 5 different attachment styles. Secure is one set, and then there's insecure. Within insecure, there are 3 different types, what we call anxious or preoccupied. This is when someone is very hyper in their emotions, and they are unfortunately labeled as being a nag. Okay. Mm-hmm. Or they're very demanding and controlling. Then you have what we call is avoidant. This is a person that will withdraw from conversations where they have nothing to say. They shut down. And these individuals are really kind of known for being like an ice princess or like Fort Knox. You can't get emotions out of them. And then you have what we call is disorganized or fearful. That is a combination of the previous 2. And that really happens because there was some type of abuse, maltreatment, or neglect in their upbringing or in a previous relationship that they became attached to. So therefore, the person that they should have been loving was unfortunately instead abusing them in some way, shape, or form. So therefore, they're confused, like, I want to love you, so I push towards that. But then when I get your love, I withdraw because that's when I remember I shouldn't trust it because previously it has hurt me. Whereas the avoidant shuts down because in their household, what they learned growing up or in their relationship, they learned, oh, we don't express emotions here. So to stay safe, don't say anything. So they become a light switch with their emotions. They can turn them on and off easily because they learn that emotions are hurtful. So therefore, I will do things in order to get the success and the emotional response that I need. The other set, which was what we call anxious, those are people that are very pushy towards expressing themselves. And it's as if they can never have enough love, so to speak. And they push towards hearing certain things or having certain conversations to the place where it's too much for another person. It's like an insatiable well that can never be filled. So in the process of really understanding those, when we work towards correcting that insecure type in order to become secure, we can never really become just straight out secure because that requires a household growing up in your childhood development for that to foster. However, we can become earned secure where we work towards that. So to answer your question, that's what they would need to do is become earned secure. When we become earned secure, then we become like that gentleman in A Beautiful Mind. We may hear certain thoughts happen in our heads. We may experience certain emotions, but instead of responding, then we ask ourselves, why am I feeling this emotion? Am I feeling this emotion because of what's happening here in this present moment? Or is this present moment triggering unsettled business from my past? And therefore, I'm being reactive towards that. Or is it a thought that I have that really goes back to how so-and-so previously made me feel? And therefore, that means we need to have 2 things. One, we need to be vulnerable enough to really be able to express that to our partner to say, hey, right now, I'm feeling this. And it's not because of you. It's really because of, and then fill in the blank for where it came from. But in the same sense, you have to have a partner who's willing to meet you halfway. So, for example, I used to be avoidant. And as an avoidant person, I could shut down easily. And in the process of doing that, I was with my partner at the time, and he said, hey, look, this isn't great. So I'm going to give you some time to be by yourself because that makes you feel better. But by this deadline, I'll give you 24 hours. By that deadline, I'm calling or I'm coming over and I'll be here for you. That was so moving for me that it let me know I needed the space to get away by myself. but I also had him to make me feel secure. And over time, just by being emotionally available for me, I was in a position where that started my process to really be able to do the work. So people really have to do the work to change those emotions and those thoughts because they're automatic. And it's a lot of work, but it definitely is doable in order to change it over time.
Wow. Thank you, Dr. Saudia Twine. You just gave us so much.
I know I talked a lot, don't I? Oh my gosh, I have to work on that.
Absolutely not. That is a great skill. But I mean, you just gave us so much to think about. I mean, I think about women and the stereotypes surrounding them, whether they're avoidant, where you're talking about the ice princess, or you're talking about the person who's an egg, or you're talking about the person who's needy. And we sort of make jokes about it in society, but there really are psychological based principles that come from our childhood, from either a wound that hasn't healed or some lesson that we learned that this is how we're supposed to behave. And one of the things I always say is hurt people hurt people. And so if you haven't been healed, if you are in pain, in fear, you're going to spread that to someone else. And a lot of relationships, probably what's going on with quarantine, it's laying a lot of these things to bear. But we have to take a break, Dr. Saudia Twine. I'm sorry, we're going to take a station break. We'll be right back with the Kim B. Davis Show. We're talking with Dr. Saudia Twine about love during quarantine. Welcome back to the Kim B. Davis Show. We are live in studio, albeit social distancing remotely, with Dr. Saudia Twine, licensed professional counselor and therapist. She's talking to us about love during the quarantine. Really quick, Dr. Saudia Twine, can you talk briefly about vulnerabilities? When I know I just gave you a general question. When we say that people need to be vulnerable, we were just talking about the ability of people to be vulnerable. But is there a tip or a trick that can help people if they're looking to start that journey right now while they're in quarantine? Really quick.
The best tip I can give you is the acronym ARE. You have to make certain that you are available for this person, meaning are you physically and emotionally available for them? And then when they open up to you or when you're opening up to them, are you responsive? Meaning that you are encouraging them in this conversation, you're letting them know that you are tentatively listening to them, and then you're making certain that they are understanding that you are with them in the conversation, not just hearing them, but you're understanding their emotions. And then are you emotionally engaged? So you are not just listening with a poker face, but you're emotionally engaging them, identifying emotions, asking them about those emotions. All three of those together will foster an opportunity for vulnerability to be expressed because you're being responsive and you're letting them know it's safe to share.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Saudia Twine. You gave us so much good information today. But tell us about your practice, tell us about your podcast, and how do we catch up with you?
Well, anyone can follow me on social media. I am on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, as well as Pinterest at Eros Meets Agape. I host I want to say particularly host, but I have a group on Facebook that's called Eros Meets Agape Game Changers. We really have two sets of people in there. We have individuals that are healing from hurt from relationship, as well as couples that are just looking for information and a support system to kind of walk them through some things. I do some live videos in there, so people are free to join that group. And then I also kind of have different things that I give people. So like I have a free ebook that I give couples or individuals in a relationship so that they can walk through some exercises in order to help them through some things and understand things better.
Okay. Is there a phone number or email or website that we should find out more information on you?
Actually, it's a link, a bit.ly link. So if I just give it to your producer, then you can put it in the show notes. So where all they have to do is just copy and paste that link and they can get that free ebook. And it's not an ebook, awesome. It's a workbook. It's like an interactive ebook workbook.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Saudia Twine, for being on the show this morning and talking to us about love during the quarantine. We are wishing all of our couples good luck in love and peace and harmony, asking that we all stay in and stay safe. Remember, eat your veggies, take your vitamins, wash your hands, and stay home.
That's
Stay
right.
safe.
Stay safe.
Stay safe. Thank you, and we will see you on the next episode of the Kim B. Davis Show. And remember, be magnificent.